So leading the 4th generation as president of Myron Green, an EBT restaurant, is Edwin J. Holland, husband of Betsy Harmon Holland. And actually, I met Ed and Betsy when my students and I were invited to their home for a lunch, actually. And I had 25 students in my class, intro to horticulture class. They treated us to a fantastic lunch. And they haven't invited us back after that, so I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, the lunch was awesome. So lunch was really good. So Ed, of course, started with Myron Green in 1975 as assistant manager of the Commerce Tower Cafeteria.
They don't care about all that.
They don't do all that. Okay, good. So Ed, of course, Ed has done a lot of things, but and he has a lot of hobbies as well. He goes pheasant hunting, and of course, what I know him for is his rose growing. See, every year we have these rose shows. At any rose show I go to, I see Ed's roses, and they always win the king and the queen, all kinds of ribbons and all kinds of awards. So that's how I know Ed. And today he's going to talk about rose cultivation. Thank you, Ed.
Good. She cut about 3 pages out, so I hope that's okay. It's so boring you don't want to hear it. Thank you, Lika. My name is Ed Holland. Can you hear me? Is it too loud? About right? Okay. The previous presentation is a 180 from what I have today. So if that's what you're expecting, you might as well just leave right now. But mine is more a practical experience of growing roses. I'm what you would call a rosarian, one who grows roses. And I do it just for fun. And I do have pesticides, and I use fungicides, and I use miticides. And I'm not an organic rosarian. But I'm not going to talk about the fancy words and all this. All I'm going to do is talk about the practicality of growing roses in your own garden, in your own landscape, front or backyard. And I do have some handouts that does talk about the fungicides, and there's a company called Rosemania, rosemania.com, if you want to write that down. That is basically my resource for all my fungicides, my insecticides, and my miticides, and some of my fertilizers. So that is a company that you would, I think, would like to get familiar with. They're very good about it. You can call them up on the phone. You can email them. They have a very good customer service department that can help you with just about any kind of questions that you might have pertaining to roses. So again, my presentation is really, it's open-ended. So if you have a question, fire away. I really don't have a strong format. I got 30 minutes just to talk about roses. But to start with, roses. Oh, I don't know. That's good. I don't know. The roses. It's good to me. That's not me either. He's got too much hair on his head. Don't use chemicals, because look what happens. But roses are like people, right? Okay, what do people need to survive? Food, water, and sunshine. Sunshine. Kind of a little bit different. We don't have to have the sunshine, but we really do. But those are the 3 things if you want to raise successful roses. If you, they say that roses, you need at least 6 hours of sunshine a day if you want to grow roses. Now the roses that I grow are for show. And these are hybrid teas, floribundas, grandifloras, miniatures. I don't have the double knockouts and the shrub roses and all those. And those are all great roses. I just don't grow them. There's nothing wrong with them. I don't grow them really. I live in the middle of a 160-acre farm. Nobody comes to see them except Lika and her students every 10 years. So I don't really grow my roses for really anything other than really for my work. I have a company called Treat America Food Services, and we manage corporate food services like H&R Block, Yellow Freight, Black & Veatch. These companies that have large corporations and have cafeterias in their corporations, we feed them. So what I do is, and we also have a restaurant called EBT Restaurant that I've had for 35 years. We've got 42 tables. So I grow my roses really for my work. And with the 42 tables, when you go in EBT from about 1st of June into May, 1st of June through mid-October, all the roses in my restaurant are out of my garden, on the table. And then we also have, I'm going to get you in 1 second. Then at the front desk, Kathy, who's been with me for 28 years, then she'll give a lot of times the ladies a rose, a miniature rose, when they leave. Because I have 151 bushes at home. About 75 are the miniatures and 76 are the hybrid teas, grandifloras, and floribundas. So I'm growing these roses because I have a purpose in mind, and that is to give them away to people. You know, I go to the gas station, the Quick Trips. They all have my roses. Wherever I go, the bank, they all have my roses. And they call me the rose man. But I do it just to give them away. And if you're going to give them away, they cannot have aphids. They cannot have spider mites. They cannot have, you know, all these little bugs and everything else. And so I use chemicals to keep them pristine, healthy plants. The Kemper Museum, we used to do the food in there. And when I would take roses in there, they couldn't have one single imperfection or any bugs on them. So that's why I am not an organic farmer. So, question, ma'am? You had a question?
I was going to ask you, Glenn and Nance,
Oh. Yeah, when we first opened in 1979, she was my dining room manager.
Yeah, we went and ate there.
Oh, Glenn and Nance, yeah. So what I wanted to do today, and we got less than 30 minutes now, but to go through the cycle of the annual cycle of growing roses and what I do to grow roses from when I put them to bed in the wintertime and then through the summer with the watering, the fertilizing, and the disking, and the deadheading, and the cutting, the pruning, the fertilizing, the insecticides, the miticides, the fungicides, all. That's what I'm kind of go through the life cycle of a year of what I do. So I think I'm going to start right now because really right now we're doing nothing. This is the end of February, 1st of March. All I'm doing now is getting my American Rose Society and going through and looking at pictures and some of the roses that I might want to buy. Although I don't buy too many roses because I graft my own roses now, and I usually graft about 25 roses a year. And we can go through that process if you have any questions on how to graft a rose. I'd be happy to do that. But right now, really, there's nothing. There's nothing to do. They've been put to bed. They were put to bed last fall, and they're just sitting there. And when, you know, a lot of people don't like snow, and I don't really like snow, but the roses and my plants, and everybody loves, you know, the plants love the snow because it's a barrier, and it protects them from the cold. Yes? Okay, that was going to be the end of mine, but we can start then if you would like. We can go back. We go back to bed. We can go back a little bit. I usually cover my roses between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Those are my two. I kind of use dates of the year when I'm doing things, but that's when I'm doing a lot of the final pruning. Because typically roses in the Kansas City area, it goes frost to frost. So think of frost to frost. So mid to latter part of October, you're going to get hit with the frost, and that starts the process of killing all the new leaves and all your fresh petals and your new growth, and they're going to be pretty much dormant by mid-November. You know, she talked about pheasant hum. I'm an avid hunter and bird dog guy, and I do field trials, but I do know that when I go on opening day, a lot of times I've taken roses to the farmer in November, because it's November 1st and opens in Missouri, then I'll have roses in, but not very often. But prior to that, so November, Thanksgiving to Christmas, you know, it's cold. They're pretty much done growing. Nothing's really going on. And roses, hybrid teas can be 3 feet, 4 feet, you know, 6 feet, 7 feet tall. And I really don't do much with it. I don't do heavy pruning until the spring. But what I do between Thanksgiving and Christmas is I will cover, like this is the rose bush here. This is your ground. The graft, which is typically right at ground level or a couple inches below, and I use a lot of, my mulch is I make my own compost. So what I do is I take the ground that's around it, and this is usually very loamy roses love real loamy soil. So I take that and I cover up that graft, because what the branches, if the branches up here, if they die, which they will, the upper portion of the rose bush, that will die in the winter. What you don't want to die is the graft, which is right down at the base. So what you want to do is you want to cover up that graft. And I usually go up 12 inches, whatever kind of soil that really I have around me, and I'll go up 12 to sometimes 18 inches. Now the miniatures I don't touch. Miniatures are hardier in the wintertime. They are more susceptible to diseases, mites, funguses, and all those things. But in the wintertime, they're much harder. So I really don't even touch them. Yes?
If it's a really wet winter, would you want to pull that down off the graft a little bit?
No.
Rot it out?
No, because the graft is down here. Those are just canes up here. Yeah. And you're going to do any rotting whatsoever. Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter. The one reason you want to cover roses in Roses can handle really cold, sustained weather, cold temperatures. What really hurts us here in Kansas City in the Midwest area is in the spring, you know, today it's 53 degrees. You know, last week it was 63. The week before that it was -10. You know, and in the springtime when it starts to warm up, particularly in March, and invariably this happens, it starts warming up and here it comes, it starts pushing new growth. And then what happens, we get that hard freeze and then it kills all that new growth. So roses are, you know, they're pushing and all of a sudden the sun and they're growing and then all of a sudden the hard freeze comes and knocks them back down and then warm, you know, it's up and down. So what you want to do is that graft, which is what you're trying to protect, you want to keep it from those sudden influx of temperatures. And you just want to keep it at a constant temperature. So in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I've mulched them. And I really do some light pruning up on the top. Because some of my roses, particularly Lynn Andersons and some of these hybrid teas that get real tall, the reason you don't have to trim them in the fall. But one thing you don't want to happen is if before you get them mulched, if you got this stem that's here and it's 6 feet tall and you get an ice storm or a lot of snow and all of a sudden this is a nice big 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch basil shoot that you really want to be able to rely on for the spring, boom, it's laid over and it's busted at the base. And then that happens, then you've got to just cut it back and it's gone. Because when it lays down on the side, it's going to break at ground level. So you just want to cut those back although you can cut them back all the way if you want. Dink Watsky, I don't know if this was a guy, he was my mentor. He's unfortunately dead. He would have been about 93 or 4 by now. Was really the best rosarian in the Midwest. He's shaking your head. Dink and Margaret. Margaret just died. Just great people. But what he would do, what his process, he would take, now he was retired and I'm still working 50, 60 hours a week. So when I get a little bit older, it's probably what I do. But he had these wire cages and cones. The white styrofoam cones, you've seen those. But he would have these wire cages and stuff leaves. He would mulch these leaves and grind them up and put these leaves around it and then put the cones on it. And then they'd have a little dome on the top of the cone with a brick. So when it was a little bit warm and it had some sunshine, he would get some air in there. He would pull that off. I mean, it was daily. He was doing something with his roses. But I hunt every week in the wintertime. And so I cover mine with the mulch that's there and I don't worry about them. I leave them there. You know, people say, well, don't you have a greenhouse? And because roses, I spend literally 17 to 20 hours a week from end of April through October. And one reason a lot of people do not grow roses is because I do think they're the highest maintenance flower that's out there. I think I see some heads. Yes?
I always heard you weren't supposed to come back in the fall because the Pythium could set up in the wind.
What is Pentium? What is that?
You were mentioning you were talking about cutting your roses
Yeah.
back in the fall. I understand about topping them so they're
Yeah.
not a kite in the wind, but you said you could cut them hard.
He didn't cut them back. Now what he would do though is he puts Elmer's glue
Oh, there you go, because I thought
on that open wound. Now actually there was an article in this, we just got this a week ago, and somebody that's got a lot of roses, I have 150, a lot of the rosarians that I compete with, they'll have 300, 400, 500 roses. Oh, it's just crazy. I mean, that's their life. That's just, they all day long, that's all they do. Most of those people are not putting Elmer's glue, but if you got 10, 15 bushes, something like that, then when you cut, it's a good, because those borers get down, those cane borers get down inside there and just take it all the way down. I've seen it so much. And I could do that, I just don't do it because I cut so many, and I have so many bushes, I don't do that. But that's what, I know Dink did that. And that's really the best way to do it. I don't do it, but a lot of people do. So then, so we've got them covered up. And you've got them cut back enough so the wind and the ice and the snow and everything else is not going to be breaking these nice basil shoots, these big, thick base shoots. And then in the spring, April 15th is tax day, and I don't know why, but Dink told me April 15th, that's when you should uncover your roses. But there is a challenge, because just last year and then 3 years ago, in 2000, I think it was 10 or 11, in early May, we had 2 frosts in early May, and it just kicked the holy you-know-what out of my roses. And unfortunately, because I had all this new growth and they were all uncovered and they were doing great and I'm so excited, and all of a sudden we get 2 frosts. And I didn't have time to go back and cover them all up because I travel a lot. There's just no way I could do it. And the weather did what it did and just really hurt them. And that hurt them all year. Those roses were stunted for the rest of the growing season. I think part of it is because all that, you know, the roots, they're sending up all that new growth and all that energy, you know, right at the beginning, and then to have it just zapped, it just hurt them for the rest of the year. So I'm a little cautious. April 15th, if I'm looking at the weather constantly to see what's happening. If I have some real good, beautiful basil shoots, everybody probably knows basil shoots. You know, the new big, the bigger canes come from the base. And when they're coming right from the crown, and they're coming up right there, those are going to be your strongest, healthiest, largest, straightest, most beautiful parts of your bush. And those cold frosts will just, well, it kills them, knocks them clear back to the graft. So you got to be a little bit careful. But so when I'm uncovering in roughly mid-April, and really pruning your roses is probably one of the most important parts of having nice roses for the rest of the year. Because you've probably seen a lot of the miniature roses you can buy at the grocery store, and a lot of the nurseries have them, and they're just full of healthy, beautiful foliage, thick, luscious, beautiful foliage, and blooms are coming up and everything, and you're just going, wow. And then by June, it's been decimated with spider mites and fungus and, you know, black spot and mildew and everything else. So when I trim in the early spring, I trim about, depends on the plant, but probably 50 to 60% of that bush away. And I've just learned this through years, because when I was really growing them, because particularly miniatures as an example, so they're coming up and they're sending up all this beautiful new growth. And by about end of May, they're just stunning. But what's going to happen is, you know, roses not only they need sunlight, but they need air. So you've got to go in there and trim a lot of that, because and particularly miniatures, because there's so many little finger stems that are coming up, and they're all shooting petals and foliage and all this. If they don't get air and some sunlight and some movement in there, then you know how those spider mites get in there and just attack everything, and because everything's just, you know, all crunched in together, and there's no way for them to breathe, and it just harbors lots of different insects and fungus, and particularly black spot. Now spraying, so let me finish about trimming. Usually you want to, the hybrid teas, you want to have about 3 or 4 of the major canes that are coming off of that graft. You want to trim those, you want to keep about 3 or 4 or 5 of those. If you've got a dozen, you know, canes that are coming up, you're going to have nothing but problems in July, August, September, October. So you're thinking, oh, I don't want to cut those back, but you've got to cut them back. You want to just have 3 or 4 or 5 big canes. And all the canes that are going sideways, typically about the size of your little finger, if it's smaller than that, you want to get rid of it. Okay? And because a lot of times these canes that come up and now they're sideways, and you've had your mulch in there and everything's all gnarly in there, and just you want to clean all of that out. And when you're taking everything away, and I have a lot of leaves in with the mulch, so you want to get all of that stuff, you know, away from the graft. And then when you're trimming, clean it up to 3 or 4 or 5 canes, and then let it go. In terms of height, the hybrid teas, I will go back, I don't have really anything more than a couple of feet. And you want to trim back any wood that is dead, or it's smaller than your little finger, or diseased, yeah, or split, and if it just doesn't look right, because you want healthy stems that are going to for the rest of your growing season. Everything is going to come off of those healthy stems. Because if you got all these things that intertwine, you got leaves, and again, no sun, no air, no wind movement in there, and that's just going to harbor insects and fungus and particularly black spot. Black spot is probably the worst fungus that's out there. And spider mites, he talked spider mites, I don't know how many times he said spider mites, but we all know. I remember one time when I was first growing them 30 years ago, I went fly fishing, and my roses were sick when I left. I came back, and I probably had 25 bushes at that time, and I didn't have a leaf on my roses. Not one single leaf. The spider mites had totally decimated, my roses. But back then, I didn't know what I was doing, and I left all those little bitty things, and I thought, boy, it's beautiful, and I go fishing in July, and I came back, and it's nothing. So don't be afraid to prune your roses. Now, what I also do is I like to use as many organic products as I can. I go down to Planters Seed, and I give my roses cottonseed meal, alfalfa meal, blood meal, fish meal, Osmocote, and I put all these, not Osmocote, but all the meals I put together, and I just make equal parts of all of them, and then I put about 3 cups per bush after I've moved back to all the mulch. And then I put about a tablespoon of Osmocote, and Osmocote is a slow release fertilizer, and I just use Osmocote once a year. And then there's another alfalfa meal. There's also alfalfa pellets. And these are just all these meals, it's just good for the soils. It's all organic, and it just makes it more luminous and a looser soil, and it just gives nice nutrients, natural nutrients to the bushes. But what I also do is alfalfa pellets. Then I'll sprinkle those, just a couple of cups, about a couple times during the season. And that, again, it just, when the water hits them, they explode and expand. And the smell, I love alfalfa. I'm a farmer. I love alfalfa. And so I put a couple of cups of those on there. In terms of other fertilizers, I use a compost. And Missouri Organics, which is over by the Royal Stadium off of, I think, 40 Highway, they compost kitchen waste. And we have about 30 of our cafeterias. We take all of our excess food waste, and they come and we store it in these bins, and Missouri Organics comes and picks it up. They put it in the compost pile and make compost out of it, and then I go buy compost to put on my rose garden. So we're kind of completing that cycle, which is fun, because we're using a lot of our own waste that would just be going to landfills is now going to Missouri Organics to make, and it's wonderful compost. And they deliver it to my house, and I usually have about, 4 or 5 pickup loads a year that I just put on my roses. My wife doesn't, she works with my roses now, but she didn't. And she's a master gardener, and all my roses in the front and hers are in the back. So we're bringing this for her roses, or my roses, and also for all of her vegetables and everything else that she does. So, but Missouri Organics, Kevin Anderson is the owner, great guy, you can Google him. But I would highly, highly recommend using his composted products that he's got. He's just awesome. So in the spring, we've uncovered them. We've given their first bit of all the alfalfa meal, bone meal, fish meal, all of that stuff. And now we're really pretty much, they're ready to, I call it sing. They're ready to really push and go. My first competition every year is the first Saturday of June, which is the Kansas City Rose Show. And if anybody's interested in our Rose Society, that's the competition. And I've been competing there for years and do pretty well. In fact, 1987, there was an article in the Star with my 2 children. My son's now 35, but he was 7 here. My daughter was 4 or 5. And Abby won the queen of the show of the miniatures, and my son won king of the show of the hybrid teas, which was fun. And I didn't have one single rose then to enter that particular day. It's a great story, but it would take too long to tell you about. But that kind of got me going, and because with my kids interested and they like to help me, and my son has his own rose garden now, and my daughter has her own rose garden now, which is really kind of fun. And we compete at the state fair, which is the state competition too, and that's always usually the 3rd Sunday of August. But so back to June. I'm preparing for the Rose Show, but what I'm really doing is I spray. One thing I forgot to tell you. The mites, particularly aphids, are an early spring bug, and you got to get rid. I use a powdered orthene that's water solvable, and the orthene gets rid of the aphids just like that. But I'm not afraid to spray, because when you go to the Rose Show, the petals that can't have any insects or fungus or black spot or mildew or any perfections on your foliage, and if you do, I just don't even take it. And so I start spraying as soon as I uncover. And because by the time I'm uncovering in April, there's some foliage that's coming out already. And I start spraying. Because all of the miticides and particularly the fungicides that are on the market, these are not cures. Now they will kill bugs. The miticides and the pesticides, they will. But the fungicides, once you get black spot, you'll have it for the rest of the summer. Once you get mildew, powdery mildew, you can, this one time I'd never seen powdery mildew, and I have these long linear roses, rose beds, and mine are all raised beds because I got a bad back, and I've got them above ground, which works great because I don't have to bend over so much. But I had this powdery, I didn't know what it was. It was just a powdery, you know what powdery mildew looks like. And then all of a sudden, within 2 or 3 weeks, I just watched it go right down my rose garden. And then it hopped over and went to the other one and just went right on down. So the fungicides you have to start spraying immediately. As soon as you see foliage, I start spraying. And I spray every single week. And if we get more of about a ½ inch of rain, I spray again. So you can figure, I have a 5-gallon sprayer, electric sprayer, rechargeable battery that I pull, and it's got about a 20-foot wand, or not a wand, but a hose and then a wand. And and I'm spraying every single week. But if you don't want to have black spot, and a lot of the organic people, gardeners, and bless your souls, I'm not one of them. Because I take and I use my roses, because I cut about 125, 150 to 200 a day, 7 days a week. That's how prolific roses are. And if you take care of roses, they will take care of you. But if you don't take care of them, they're a menace. And you've got problems all year. But I start spraying, and if it rains more than a ½ inch, then I spray again, and that's another 5 gallons. It takes about 5 gallons for me to spray all of my garden, or all of my roses. And I have a respirator. I have a pretty good respirator. I think that's important too. I don't know, I'll get cancer sometime, but I'm 60 years old now. I'm okay so far, but that's all right. But start spraying, because, and also other than, excuse me, black spot and mildew, there's just all kinds of other funguses that you're going to be able to get. I do have some handouts for you. That these are rose sprays preferences. It's a reference guide from Rosemania. I've got also from Rosemania. It just talks about the different chemicals that you can use and what you can use together. I've got a how to prune your roses in the spring, so if you need something to take with you. And then this is Dink's. This was probably 30, 40 years old. They don't even have some of these chemicals now, but I brought that in honor of Dink Watsky. But so you're spraying. The more you cut your roses, the more they're going to bloom. Yes?
Do you rotate your fungicides?
I do. And I don't have a system down. There's some that are very similar for black spot. There's multiple black spots, and some are 1 week, some are 14 days, and some are 21 days. So I do kind of rotate those, and they say it's going to have more of an impact and be more effective if you do rotate them, because insects can get immune to certain insecticides, and funguses can do the same thing. So rotating is good. I've got 11 different products that I put on. And I don't put them all on at the same time, but I will mix 5 or 6 at a time. Yes, I do. Yes.
And some of those have the same mode of action list. That's the key. Is you're not rotating product, you're rotating mode of action.
No, right, and that's more what I was saying.
Yeah, here's the chemical, because some, for example, carp 7 and acetylorthine, they're different chemical classes, but they're the same mode of action. So you're rotating modes of action, not product. It's very important to understand, because if you use the same mode of action over and over again, that's when you get resistance buildup in the population.
That's why I want to get with you, Doc, so I can, because I don't want to waste my money. These are very expensive products. How much time do we have? Because I don't know. Okay, all right. Anyway, I do rotate. But they are effective. I don't really have much black spot. I don't have very few spider mites. Japanese beetles I've knock on wood, I don't have any yet, but I know, I talked to a lady earlier that they are coming. They are horrible. They're really coming from the East Coast, and we want to stay away from those. Yes?
Have you had any rosetta?
Rose rosette, yes, I have. This is, I was told that if you have a rose bush that's got rose rosette or witch's broom, they're similar. I know they're different, but they are similar. But I've got a rose called Rise and Shine that had half of the bush had this rose rosette, and half of it was fine. I just went and took my spade and I cut, this is 20 years ago, and I cut it and discarded the other part, threw it in a bag and threw it away, and that rose is as healthy as anything I've got right now. But I was told that you should get it, once you get it, get rid of the entire bush. I've had maybe in the last 20 years, maybe a dozen bushes that have had it, but I've taken the whole bush out now. because before I didn't know what it was. But that bush is still just as healthy as.
So do you think it's contagious? I mean,
You know, let Doc handle that one. That's.
Thanks, Ed. Well, I'll go over very fast. Rose rosette is vectored by an aerophyte mite. It's a virus. Once the mite feeds on the plant, injects the virus, the plant is infected for life. We actually have an extension fact sheet here on Kansas State University rose rosette disease. I updated it last year. Once a plant has rose rosette, it's history. You get to dig it out. Don't plant another knockout there for about 2 weeks to allow any sucker growth to come out, and you can spray the Roundup and pull it out, and then you can put another knockout. But once the mite injects the virus, the rose rosette disease virus in the plant, it's a virus for life.
But I don't know why, Doc, and I understand what you're saying. That's what I do now. But that one called Rise and Shine, I did half of it, and it's flourishing today. But so, I got lucky. I don't want to go over my welcome, but I don't know if this was beneficial today. I don't know. I don't normally do this. But if you have any questions, Ed Holland's my name. I go to people's gardens and look at them, and if you ever have any questions, I'd be more than happy to help you in any way that I can. And I have handouts up here that you can come and take. I got plenty of them, so if you want to come up and have at it. But I love to talk roses and bird dogs. If you want to talk bird dogs, I can do too. These are hunting dogs, English pointers, setters. Yeah. Real DSPs, yeah. Do they really? Don't know, Bill. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
I was just wondering, do you ever container garden any of your roses?
I don't. Some of my graft, I told you I graft roses, and I do some of the, I have some in containers, but typically not. Mine are in the ground. Mine are all in the ground.
Actually, you have raised beds, don't you? You have raised beds.
These are all, mine are raised beds, but they're all in the soil right there.
Yeah.
But Dink Watsky, that's what he did. He did a lot of that. Very successful.